If I looked at it as rape, I couldn't stay. So it wasn't rape, because I needed to stay. It wasn't violent. It wasn't, but I was crying and I said no, and I told him to stop, and I tried to stop his hands, and then I just froze. These are the voices of women who survived sexual violence and chose to share their stories in interviews with me. As a criminologist, I wanted to answer a fundamental question: how do people come to understand an experience as violating and traumatic as rape? Sexual violence is distressingly common, but we know from the research that many rape survivors don't call their experience rape. Among survivors who are women, the acknowledgement rate is about 40%, less than half. Among male survivors, that rate is even lower, around 20%, or 1 in 5. What's going on here? We have this narrative that a rapist is a stranger in a dark alley. He is a violent criminal who suddenly and brutally attacks an innocent victim. She is not doing anything wrong, she is simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. He is undeniably a monster. After the attack, she is traumatized and devastated. In my field, we call this narrative the real rape script. A script is a kind of mental model or a cultural idea about how a thing usually goes. This is the script that we have for the kind of rape we consider real or legitimate. Whenever someone says, "It wasn't really rape," this is usually what they mean. This script also relates to ideal victim theory, this idea that there are correct ways to be a victim that are morally above reproach. Survivors who fail to meet our criteria for what an ideal victim should look like are often blamed for the assault. Why was she out so late drinking? Why didn't he fight back? What did they expect walking around dressed like that? This narrative is a myth. It does happen sometimes, but most rape isn't like that at all. In Australia, 90% of sexual assault survivors were assaulted by someone they know: a husband, a date, a friend, a co-worker, an ex. Most sexual assault is perpetrated in a residential location. And we're not talking small numbers. Around 2 million Australians, 1 in 6 women and 1 in 20 men, have experienced sexual assault since age 15. So we have this idea about what rape typically looks like, but rape survivors' experiences hardly ever reflect that narrative. Most rape happens in a residential location, but we rarely imagine rape happening in someone's home, in our home. Most survivors are assaulted by someone they know, but we rarely imagine rape being perpetrated by someone we know, perhaps someone we genuinely love and respect. Our culture, our media, our society all tell us it's the monster under the bed. But we already know it's the monster in the bed. For my PhD research, I interviewed 11 women who had experienced sexual violence. I wanted to know how they came to understand their experiences. Did they use the word rape? Why? Or why not? One woman who spoke with me, Anita, told me about an experience she had with her boyfriend, the man she loved, the man she intended to marry. When I asked her what happened with him, she told me, "I'm going to be blunt, I was sodomized without my consent." They had spoken about anal sex before. Her feelings were clear. She was not interested. Later in the interview, she told me it was such a violation of a previously stated boundary that I couldn't quite believe that this man who I had trusted with my life was doing that. This is the impossible contradiction that many rape survivors face. How do you reconcile this person you love with this person who violated you? Most rape is perpetrated by someone the survivor knows. but it is hard to call your partner a rapist. When I talk about my research, people often say that the victim blaming must be so hard for survivors. And it is. But the harder thing seems to be the way that survivors internalize this blame and level it at themselves. Why was she drinking becomes, why was I drinking? This is how shame creeps in. Shame is the insidious voice in your mind that whispers, this was my fault. And it tends to ignore other crimes. Few people who are mugged think to themselves, maybe he thought I wanted that. I didn't scream after all. Later in the interview, Anita told me, there was a bit of me that goes, well, why didn't you say stop? Why didn't you make a ruckus so that he would stop? Like, I just sort of froze. Many women echoed the sense of shame, the sense that they were somehow responsible for the act, or responsible for making it stop. Anita now forgives her younger self. She understands that in that moment, the shock of the experience left her frozen. And in the wake of the assault, she still wanted to make it work with the man that she loved. Their relationship ended a few months later. She told me she now knows that this was his fault, and she calls it rape. When I was a teenager, I lived in the suburbs, near a park where I would sometimes hang out with friends after school. We would sometimes stay until after dark, and on those days, when I said goodbye and I went to walk home, my female friends would say, "Don't get raped and murdered." Our narrative of rape is violent. It's physically violent. And many of the women who spoke with me really struggled with this. They told me, my assault wasn't violent, so it couldn't be rape. For one woman who had never had sex before, it was being woken up by the pain of her boyfriend having sex with her sleeping body. He had pulled her pants off while she was asleep. For one woman, it was crying and saying no while her partner digitally penetrated her, his face cold, silent, just looking at her. For one woman, it was years of being guilted into sex she didn't want by her husband, knowing in her heart that she was a lesbian and feeling increasingly repulsed by this thing that she did to make him happy. Each of these women told me my experience wasn't violent. Whenever a survivor said something like that to me in an interview, I would always ask, what does that mean for you? What does violence mean for you? One woman who spoke with me, Patricia, said, there was no, he didn't punch me or anything like that. She was referring to a time when she was attacked by a man at her workplace who threw her to the ground and raped her. She recalled kicking the door of a nearby office, trying to make some noise even though it was after hours and she knew nobody was there. In recounting this story, she told me there was no overt violence. That really struck me. But I stayed quiet. My role in the interview was to hold space, not to tell survivors that I feel uncomfortable about their experience. But she went on to reflect, I guess it's a violent act in and of itself, isn't it? Most of the women who spoke with me call their experiences rape now. Belle told me that after years of minimizing her abusive husband's behavior, she has now claimed the words rape and coercive control. She told me, I call it that because naming it gives me my power back. For Patricia, labeling helped her understand the confusing symptoms of depression and anxiety that seemed to come out of nowhere following the attack at her workplace. But calling it rape may not always be the right path. Some survivors told me that even though they knew their experience met the definition, they didn't want to use the word rape. One woman I spoke with, Jess, was assaulted by her friend when she was a teenager. The experience was awful, and she told me she had to minimize it so she could continue to cope with having to see him at school every day. She didn't call it rape until well after she graduated. The reasons to not label were as unique and individual as survivors themselves. Calling it rape feels disempowering. It paints the wrong picture. It makes me feel like I have to report. In the wake of sexual violence, every survivor's path is different. But survivors should feel that they can claim the word rape if it's right for them. So many survivors walk this path with an overwhelming sense of shame or the fear that they won't be believed because their experience doesn't fit the narrative. You can call it rape, even if it was someone you know, even if it wasn't physically violent, even if that voice in your head is whispering, "This was my fault." We have to remember that these are the features of the common narrative. They are not the features of the common experience. I was really moved listening to these women share their stories. I started each interview by asking, why did you want to participate? I wanted to honor what each survivor wanted to get out of this experience, to honor why they wanted to contribute. Most survivors told me that they wanted to participate to help other survivors. While this didn't surprise me, I was still amazed that these women, after so much pain and struggle, chose to relive some of the worst moments of their lives with the hope that others might benefit from hearing their story. Nobody seemed especially motivated by the $30 gift card that I was offering for participation. Here's what they want you to know. This path is rife with shame, with shock, with not knowing what to call it, and not feeling entitled to make it a big deal. These feelings are intensely isolating, and they are all too common. If you want to call it rape, you should. If you don't want to, that's okay. And if you don't know what to call it, that's normal. The label is your choice, and you are allowed to say it. You are allowed to make it a big deal. You should not have been hurt, and support is available if you want it. Every survivor carves their own path, and it is a hard path to walk. But whatever choice you make is right, if it's right for you. Every survivor carves their own path, and you are not alone. Thank you.